now is obviously gone. So I was doing this talk in Danville, and the lady who was supposed to introduce me got sick and couldn't do it. So they had nobody. So I just introduced myself. And I said, great speaker, he's very funny, wonderful, educated guy. Anyway, but it's kind of fun. I'm really glad to be here. Honestly, I didn't know anything about Beachville. When I started this book and started thinking about baseball and the history, I knew about Labatt Park because I played there. And my friend Barry Bugner here I played with, he's the president of the Alumni Association. The Alumni Association, the Friends of Labatt Park, a great writer, Chip Martin, who you probably know and had before, and Bob Barney, Professor Barney, did so much research about Labatt Park and really put basically Labatt Park in London really on the world stage of baseball. And Beachville was, like, for me, I don't even know. I mean, I grew up in Tillsonburg, Chatham, back to Tillsonburg, played baseball, and, where Barry, I was telling him, Langton, Caledonia, Walsingham, all over the place. And Beachville just didn't mean anything. I didn't know. And then when I started reading about it and researching, I thought, my God, what a hidden treasure is this little town. And the history, not only associated with baseball, but everything else, is really quite commendable. And you people that are in the Historical Society, to keep this thing alive is wonderful. Just like I say to Labatt Park and to Barry and his gang, my God, the legacy is alive and kicking. And the reason that I wrote this book is because of some reunions. And I went to a baseball reunion that Barry orchestrated, and we sat around, remember the Bruce Springsteen story, The Glory Days? You talk about what it was like and what we did and we played and all the memories we had. And I talked to some guys, my first baseball coach, all-star coach, Jack Ferris, professor, university, passed away now, was well into his 90s, wonderful man, fundamentalist, great guy, even had him in the College of Education teaching. And he told stories about when he played. And there was another guy, Tubby Jones, who was what? Was he 100 at the time?
14 days from 100.
14 days from being 100 years old. Played on the London Army team. And he had stories. And then I started thinking about the guys that I played with, even before Barry started, and they were older than me, and they were experienced, and a lot of them were pros. They were pro players. And we'd go to a ball game in Kitchener, and I played there since I was that high, but as an Intercounty guy. And I was sitting there on the bench, and one of the players said, "Hey, Alan, see that house out there in left center field?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, the great Negro League player Wilmer Fields hit it on the roof. And as a matter of fact, it's a wonder that fence is still standing, because he hit 2 line drives that just about knocked the fence over." So I've heard these stories. Then you go to another park, you go to Galt, and every been to the Galt Park, Cambridge now. Left field is short, the Grand River is behind it, it goes out to about 8,000 miles out there. And there's a railroad trail, and it's just no fence out there. We lost the championship because I didn't catch the ball. That just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. And the guys would say to me, "Hey, Alan, see that tree over there in right center field?" "Yeah." "Well, there used to be a barn there, and it had a steel roof on it. And they called it Steele's Barn, because the great Negro League player, Ed Steele, used to hit home runs off that thing." So I heard these stories, and I first started writing, and I'm just to give you the background on this. I started writing about me and my friends in the years I played. And then it occurred to me, who the hell cares about me? I'm nothing compared to these other guys. In the glory years of the Intercounty, this was major baseball. And I just started researching these guys. And I got help. I mean, Ann Chamberlain from Brantford, Ed Heather is a former Toronto Blue Jay scout, is got like a museum of programs and everything from the Galt Terriers. And I got help, Ron Gervais, Western, Stephen Harding, Barry Bugner, all the research, and just started putting it together. And I thought, you know, this is a pretty good story, based on the fact that I also knew a lot of those guys, because I'm not a young kid anymore, but I was younger when I played. And I have a fairly good memory. And I thought, my God, some of these guys were Major League Baseball players. I was managed, he was too, by a Major League player, Tom Burgess. Tim Burgess, depending on where you are, what talent. But, you know, Johnny Ambrose, played in the Quebec League. Gabby Anderson, terrific guy. Gabby, Stan Everson, they call him Gabby because he never said anything. But was he ever a good ball player? And he was a pro. And you know, I played with a guy who played for the Giants. And so it was really an exciting thing for me to start with. So the book starts off with the Beachville and the history of baseball in Labatt Park, and then we get into Intercounty. And I was lucky because she said I graduated from the Chatham minor baseball system. I was lucky because, guess, Jack Ferris was my first coach. He played the Intercounty, and he a terrific guy. And then my next coach was Joe Bayshard, who was a batting champion in the Intercounty, graduate of Michigan State. He was a good guy. And then I had Willie Casanova, who played in the New York Yankee organization. Never played for the Yankees, but played all those years. Great ball player, great football player. And then I had his brother, Bruno Casanova, who was my fourth coach. And he played in the Pony League, Pennsylvania, Ontario, New York League. And he was a great player. So I had all of these coaches, and I got the opportunity, because of Chatham, to play in an integrated system where it didn't matter what color you were, it didn't matter how big you were. If you could play ball and you wanted to learn how to play ball, these guys taught us how to play ball. And out of that system comes the guy down on the right-hand side you may have heard of by the name of Fergie Jenkins. So when I do my talks, I say, everybody in Chatham played with Fergie. No, they didn't. They're just from Chatham and they want to connect with Fergie. So I tell people, and don't get mad at me for saying this, Fergie played with me. And I'm going to see him at the end of June when I go to Texas. So, but I did play with Fergie. I was fortunate. That's me and Fergie. We shared the mound. Another guy I'd like to point out to you, as far as the integrated capabilities and success of the baseball and the Chatham minor baseball system, is a guy by the name of Mel Wakabayashi. Mel was born in an internment camp. World War II was raging, and the wisdom of our government, sometimes we question them even today, they decided to move all the Japanese people out of certain areas and put them in camps, like prison camps, and put them up in very small sheds and stuff. Mel was born in an internment camp. And he came out of that, the family came out, they went to Chatham. Mom and Dad worked several jobs. There was three children. I knew all of them, Shirley, Don, and Mel. Played with Mel. Mel's about 5'6", maybe. What a baseball player. And they thought, the scouts thought he was too small. He played second base. And at the time that I played, and some of you gentlemen played, what was your job when you were on first base and it was ground ball hitting the shortstop if you're the runner? Take the second baseman out. Clip him, run him south, run him over.
Keep the spikes high.
Knock him down. Yeah, aim at him. Now, you know, it's interference, but that was the job. So they thought Mel was too small. So at the time that Mel was being noticed, most of the second basemen in the major leagues were big guys. I wrote in the book, there's one or two that were smaller, but in weight size, they were much bigger and stronger than Mel was. But Mel actually went down and went to spring training in Lakeland, Florida, played really well, but his love was hockey, and gosh, was he a hockey player. He's one of the best 50 hockey players in college, scored 2 goals in their championship. I sent my book to an interview reviewer in Chicago. I just saw it, and he says, review baseball books, you know, blah, blah, blah. I sent it off to him, and he wrote an unbelievable review. Mostly because he didn't know anything about Canada, which is not unusual. They have challenges geographically. They have no idea. Wait till I go to Texas and lay it on them and show them that there are 29 states that are farther north than southwestern Ontario. So maybe we should annex them. Anyways, so he said in part of his interview, and I thought you'd enjoy this, the first recorded baseball game was played in Canada. I didn't know that. Yeah, in Toronto, Hamilton Point. Babe Ruth hit his first home run there. First recorded baseball game, right here. First baseball coach was Brother Matthias, a Canadian. Hundreds of former Negro Leagues and former League players played in Canada. People have no idea how many Negro League players played here. Not just in Intercounty, but in the Manitoba-Dakota League. They played in Manitoba, they played in Saskatchewan, played in Alberta, and they played in British Columbia. And there was more Negro League players played in Canada than there was in the Negro Leagues at times. That's how welcome they were. Canada is the home to the oldest continuously operated league in the world. He said, I didn't know that. He didn't know anything about Labatt Memorial Park, although he said he had had a Labatt Blue. Oldest continuously played diamond, courtesy of the London Majors. When you walk out around the corner, there's a copy of the Major League letter that says we recognize Labatt Park, the oldest one. Jack Graney was the first pro player to face Babe Ruth, the first one to get a hit. And Graney was the first Canadian to do a radio play-by-play for the Cleveland, at the time, Indians. So we have this history. Frank Selkirk replaced Babe Ruth. He's a Canadian. He wore the same number as Babe Ruth until it was retired. And of course, you all know, I assume, about Tip O'Neill. I hear he's from around here. Had the highest batting average, and they changed it because they counted walks as hits and stuff. But he was a Canadian, and of course he still has the second highest batting average. So here's my plan, and I usually, you can see I talk, but I don't have a script. I just kind of roll along with it. But here's what I think I have told you already: a brief baseball history. Okay, I'm going to tell you about the early baseball players that I researched, about the Intercounty, the glory year with some teams and players, and then I'm going to wrap it up telling you about some taters. Chip Martin's been here, and this I can't wait to show the U.S. because that is an academic book. I want you to buy my book, but that's an academic book, really well done, well researched. And I ran across a statement that said, who invented baseball? Nobody really says. Is it a truth or an exciting lie? The Americans claim the first recorded game was here. No, not so. You know that, won't spend any time on it. But we do know, latest research, is that there were some type of baseball played in 1793 in St. John, New Brunswick, and in 1819 in Hamilton, Ontario. And this is good research, verified. Obviously, Beachville, that's the Woodstock Archives, and it was played before this 1845 game that the New York Knickerbockers and the Massachusetts people claim to be the first recorded baseball game. It isn't. 1877, as we progress along, oh, did I have fun doing this in Pittsburgh. Woo! So do you know that a Canadian team won basically the World Series of baseball? No, I didn't know that. Said, well, there was an international association in 1877. Now, they're very proud of the Pittsburgh Alleghenies. Okay, I'm doing this at Forbes Field administrative office for the Pirates are. And it's a beautiful venue. And you look over the ballpark, and these guys are on the edge of their seats when I saw them. I said, yeah. I said, well, London had a team. They were called the Tecumsehs. And then there's your team, Pittsburgh, Rochester, Manchester, New Hampshire, Columbus, Ohio, Guelph, Ontario, and the Lynn, Massachusetts, Lynn Live Oaks were quite a team. I said in the championship game, the Canadian team, London, beat Pittsburgh 5-2. And they just kind of groaned as I went along. But we have a proud, proud history of baseball. I believe this is the man who is the first black player in pro baseball. He played on the team in that league, and that I just mentioned to you, and he threw a two-hitter against the London Tecumsehs. And he is now in the Hall of Fame, not as a player, but as a builder, because he was sought out by other people on how to run a team. There's the letter, thanks to Barry. I made a copy of it. There's a picture of Labatt Park. How many of you have been to Labatt Park? If you haven't, shame on you. Get over there and see that ballpark. But anyways, I'll show that to my friends down in Texas. There is Tip O'Neill. There's another great Canadian, Bob Elmsley. He was 32-17, 32 wins and 17 losses way back in 1884, and then he umpired for years and years. There's a guy from London, never heard of him, never knew anything about him until I talked to Boogner and the London Alumni Association. He managed the Pittsburgh Pirates to a World Series, was a catcher, and evidently the great Ty Cobb didn't steal any bases on him. I think he threw him out, I could be wrong on this, at least two times during the World Series. And he was from London, Ontario. And he's the guy that convinced John Labatt to give the grounds to the City of London and have it for people. There is grading. This is on the side building in downtown St. Thomas. I just bumped into it. I was doing a talk at the St. Thomas Historical Society. I had some time, went downtown, parked, went for a little walk, and I went, what's that? And I never heard of Jack Rainey before. But that was there also. So the Intercounty started in 1919. Those are the four teams that got together. I think they got together in Hespeler. And they probably were at the same bar that we used to stop at on the way through. Galt and Guelph and Kitchener and Stratford. And they were called the Nationals. Would anybody like to, I'm a teacher now, would anybody like to tell me how the Stratford team were called the Nationals? Railroad? We'll go to the top of the class. Yes, the Nationals. CNR actually sponsored that team when they went into the league. And there's some great stories about a guy who later played in London. We won't do Hurtenrager, that they claimed that they built the ballpark for him because he was a left-handed batter. And it's a short fence. I believe this is the first black player to play in the Intercounty, Harry Coursey. Harry was quite an athlete. He was a track and field guy. He did not go to the Olympics, but he ran faster in some meets than two of the guys that the Olympic Committee sent from Canada to the Olympics. Now, was there a little racial thing in there? Yeah. You know what they told him? They said, well, you need more training using the starting blocks. And they probably didn't even use starting blocks at that time, but you need more practice on your start. So they didn't send him. But he did play intercounty baseball, and I guess he was quite an athlete. Another thing I like to tell people about, again, I don't know whether you've read Miriam Wright's book or Heidi Jacobs' book on the Chatham All-Star team. The thing that is interesting about these guys is that they were an all-black team that won a provincial championship in intermediate baseball. And the controversy of it, and is anybody from the Hall of Fame here? Okay, I'll say it anyways. The controversy and those who choose people to be in the Hall of Fame is they don't see color or black as a criteria accomplishment to be in the Hall of Fame. Does that make sense? They just see intermediate A team. And they have a point, but there's a big push for them to get in the Hall of Fame. But, we talk intermediate A. I played an intermediate A OBA championship. We're not in the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame. So there's this controversy about it. But they were a terrific team. I circled Flat Chase, and I want you to remember that name, Flat Chase, because I'm going to tell you about him a little bit later on. Great stories about him. So baseball starts really rolling, and it had rolled for years. But in 1946, at the end of the war, the great Bob Feller was a bit of an entrepreneur. He was always looking to make more money than what he got playing baseball. So he came upon the idea that the Negro League All-Stars should play the Major League Baseball All-Stars. And he put it together. And he rented airplanes. And he got Satchel Paige on board. And he said, Satch, give us the best black players you got. I'll get the best guys I can get. And we'll barnstorm and we'll travel all over the United States and we'll play exhibition games. Now the story, Ed, is that the Negro League players held their own, if not beat the Major League players more than the Major League did. I don't know about that. That's for Chip Martin or Bob Barney to figure out. But they respected each other. The thing that I got a kick out of is the kick. Two of the greatest pitchers that ever stepped on the mound. And look at that. You don't see that today. You see this today. And I mean, they throw hard, but I mean, this kick. And four of the players, three from here and one from there, Jeep Jessup, Barney Brown, Max Manning, black Negro League players, and Phil Marshall, a Canadian from up around Midland area, all traveled with that team. Now, none of those guys played in the, quote, white major leagues until Page got there as the oldest rookie of the year. But Phil Marshall played pro for Kansas City. Remember I told you about Earl Flat Chase? Who do you think Earl Flat Chase beat in the Ontario Championship Series? Phil Marshall. So Flat was that good as a pitcher and a hitter that he beat a guy that played Major League Baseball. Not that he beat him three times. Basically beat him three times. Terrific ball player. I think that the glory years were 48 to 58 because there were 45 Negro League players in Intercounty, 45 minor pros with pro balls, and 20 Major League players. So they may have been the best of the best. Now, in 1947, you all know that number 42, I guess, Jackie Robinson, went to the Dodgers. Did you know he played for the Montreal Royals? Okay, good. And did you know that he started in Daytona? Okay, he started in Daytona because that's where the Dodger camp was. And he makes it to the major leagues in 47. In 46, they won their league championship. And Jackie Robinson got mobbed, and they were hugging him and throwing him up in the air. And he says, that's the first time in my life that a black guy got mobbed out of happiness. And he said that Montreal meant more to him than he could ever express because they were tolerant of him and accepted him for the ball player. If you ever are down in the Daytona Beach area, you gotta, just like I said, you gotta go to Labatt Park. That's a closer trip for you. But if you ever go back, to the States again, you got to go see that ballpark because it's a fantastic ballpark and there's a lot about them. You see, London dominated the Intercounty for a very long time. The 40s were basically London. The 46 team was it 46 or 47? Barry, the one you said you thought was the best. 47?
I think the 47 team was better than the 48 team that won the North American Championship.
Okay, so
because they didn't play in it.
Exactly, but after the war, 46, 47, 48, and then right up around 49, London dominated. And I did some stats for the people that enjoy percentages. They won 5 IBL championships between 43 and 48, which is 83% of the time London won the Intercounty Championship. And in 1948, they won the Intercounty Championship, they won the Canadian Championship, and then they challenged, or the Americans challenged them to play in the Canadian American North American Championship. And the Americans, you know what they call taking liberty when they do a movie and it ain't exactly true? So be careful on this one, don't tell anybody I said this. But the Americans, I think, this is my liberty, thought, oh hell, we'll just go to Canada, 4 out of 7, we'll beat them and go home. Why would we come up here, and then have them come back down there, and 2 games here, 2 games there, back there, it's gonna cost a lot of money, let's go and kick their tails in Canada. It didn't work out that way. It was a close series, and this team was loaded with former Major League, at least 3, I think, Major League ball players. So they were really good. But guess what? The London guys weren't too bad either, and they had a pitcher by the name of Tommy White. Tommy White, in 1948, was 25-1. Going 25 games and lost 1. In his career, he won 9 Intercounty championships, 4 Ontario championships, 4 Canadian, won the Can-Am, and was awarded the Babe Ruth Award as Canada's most outstanding player. And he won 3 games? 3 games in that best-of-7 series. And boy, and my coach, Joe Bayshard, played on that team. He was my Pee-wee or Bantam coach. He was and Barry's manager in London, 2-time batting champion. He's on that team. And this guy up here by the name of Burgess was also on that team. This guy, the Detroit Tigers wanted him so badly, but he wouldn't go. Why wouldn't? People ask me, I get so excited about these players and how good they are. Okay, you got that? They were really good ball players, and they're Canadians. Why didn't they play Major League Baseball? Because they were making so much money in the Intercounty, they didn't want to go play in Detroit. They were making big money. Johnny Ambrose's son played for the London Majors years later. Again, I'm showing my age here. He was a bat boy when I played, but he played years. And I asked him, I said, what did your dad get when he left professional baseball after winning the championship in Quebec with the Quebec Braves in the Braves organization to play in St. Thomas? He says he made about $450 a month. Now you got to do the math. $450 a month back in 1953, 54, when Johnny? A lot of money. And I'm going to tell you about another guy that made a lot of money, but they had a solid team. So those are some of the players. Now, 1949. You got to remember, put this into context. London is dominating. What happens when Ingersoll beats Woodstock and Woodstock beats Ingersoll and Tillsonburg? There's rivalry. We're close to each other. Listen, when the Windsor Bulldogs played the Chatham Maroons in hockey, it was war. I mean, they were in the stands swinging sticks and fighting. I was around long enough that they played the national anthem to stop guys from fighting. Or turn the lights off in the arena so they couldn't hit each other. I mean, it was a war, and the rivalry between towns is there. Kitchener is how far from Waterloo? That far. Yeah. How far is it Brentford? That far. Yeah. How far is it, in London and St. Thomas? These guys are tremendous rivals. And the boys in the Intercounty are thinking, we're getting tired of London. They don't, even today, don't like London. We never liked Kitchener. So, it's fair. But they decided, Galt particularly, we got to beat London. So he had connections. The owner of the team is this guy here, Gus Murray. And Gus was connected and loved baseball with George Selkirk, the Canadian who replaced Babe Ruth. So he connects with George and says, I got a team that I own in Galt, Ontario. I want some ball players. I want to beat London. So he hooked them up with Tommy Padden, who was a former player for the Yankees, I think, or the Pittsburgh Pirates. And he said, get me some players. The first guy they reached out for was the first black player from the Negro Leagues to play in the Intercounty. And I'll tell you about it in a minute. But this guy, Gus Murray, was Canada's Bill Veeck. Who knows who Bill Veeck is?
Owner of the White Sox.
Yeah, and St. Louis Browns. Etc., etc., and was one of the greatest promoters that baseball ever saw. He had firecrackers when somebody hit a home run. He had flowers for Mother's Day. He brought in, I guess at the time we would call him a midget. Today we'd call him a very small person. He was like 4'3", signed him to a professional contract, put it in the newspapers. The place was packed. Eddie takes 4 pitches, goes down to first base, and then they send in an order for him. Free beer, like everything that Bill Veeck did. Veeck said, we're not very good, but that doesn't mean we can't have fun at the ballpark. So he did, and he was a promoter. Gus Murray was Canada's Bill Veeck. The opening game of the 1949 season, picture this, in Galt, Ontario, they have a parade of the team in cars. And they had one player riding a horse dressed up in, I think the term at the time would be an Indian headdress, or a native person, indigenous, I'm not sure how I am on this stuff, but he was a Cherokee, and evidently from Oklahoma. He rides a horse, goes into the ballpark, gets off the horse, runs out onto the pitcher's mound, takes off his headdress and he's got a perfectly pressed, clean, blue pinstripe, just like the New York Yankees Galt Terrier uniforms. And the other Terriers run out from the dugout, and the place goes nuts. And he's the pitcher. And he played for the Brooklyn Dodgers before he came up to play in Galt. He had a cake baking contest at home plate. So he was a great promoter, and after the war, you know, people were still driving to come to these games. There's Tommy Padden, that's Jeff Shelton, that's Babe Ruth, and behind the plate is Tommy Padden. Now, one of the Sharpies in the group once said to me, "How can that be Tommy Padden? Because Babe Ruth played for the Yankees, and that guy played for the Pirates. Where did Babe Ruth play after he got done with the Yankees? The Boston Braves. So the National, it's a National League picture. Jeff Shelton was a Navy veteran. He had traveled to Canada on barnstorming. They knew about him. They knew he was a good pitcher, and they knew he could hit, so they brought him in. Then they brought a guy who played for the Dodgers out of Toronto. His name is Goody Rosen. Never heard of him before in my life. Finished third in the National League in batting. Was a great softball player, a great AAA player. Played for the Dodgers in the outfield. Ran afoul of Leo Durocher, and many people ran afoul of Leo Durocher. And played a lot of AAA. They brought him in and he played. And that is Tommy Warren. And there were two other major league players also that played on that team. Connie Creedon and a guy who played for the Montreal Canadiens and was a hockey first, baseball second. A guy out of Hespeler area, Prescott. Vern Kaiser. Never heard about him before, but by God was he a ball player. Remember Burgess again? Burgess was, before he passed away, got together with one of the Galt players from the 1949 team. Wes Lilly was the shortstop. And Ed Heather, our mutual friend, Toronto Blue Jay scout, and Tom Burgess and Wes Lilly and a former Blue Jay scout who's from Galt started talking about Vern Kaiser. And they said, yeah, you know, Rosen and Shelton and Creedon and those guys got all the ink. But Vern Kaiser had a better batting average, had more RBIs, and was a better ball player than any of them. And Tom Burgess, who played Major League Baseball, said he was a better player than me. He had a better arm, he was faster, he was stronger. And Wes Lilly said, I'll tell you, man, he said, if he was in the outfield and he threw a ball in, you didn't want to be the cutoff man. He said, he'd take your glove right off your hand. He threw the ball so hard. But his love was hockey. So he did play for the Canadiens for a while, and then he played down in Texas. This is another great player, Stan Lipka. He came from the Dodgers organization, played in Brantford in 1949, and he played with Walter Olson, Roy Campanella, and Don Newcomb. And Stan was a really good ball player, a real clutch player. So what happens, and it's a really good story, what happens is Brantford beats this pro-laden team in the semifinals. And everybody went, oh, what happened? And the scuttlebutt of it all is that Tommy Warren was betting against his own team. Picture this, close game, sixth game, runner on second base, 2 out, Galt ahead by 1, top of the 9th inning. Pop up, just behind the shortstop. Wes Lilly runs out, says, I got it. And Tommy Warren in the outfield calls him off. You know what that means? That means the outfielder has precedence over the infielder. Okay? I got it, comes in, runs on it, doesn't get to the ball. Ball drops, second base scores, next guy gets a single, next guy knocks in a run, they go 3 out, 3 down the bottom of the ninth. Brantford beats this team. Warren leaves the next day after he cleaned out his bank account. And he was a notorious guy. I found out about him in the book. He served time in prison back in Oklahoma. He told people in Tulsa, Oklahoma, he said, I got connections, you know, for my pro baseball. I can get you cheaper cars in Detroit than you can buy in Tulsa. So, oh, that's a good deal. How much? Tommy landed up in Mexico. They got him when he came back, but he was a great ball player. Manny McIntyre was a first pro Canadian baseball player that we know of. Great hockey player also. He signed with Waterloo and knocked in the winning run in the 1950 championship. And this guy right here, the reason I put him in it is he's the only Negro League player that I know of that played for the London Majors. And he was a great pitcher, Ted Alexander from the Homestead Grays. He's also noted in Jackie Robinson's book saying a brother by the name of Alexander recommended me to a Negro League team. So it's quite possible that Ted Alexander is the one that, you know, really encouraged Robinson to go farther. There's another Canadian. He's from, is he from here, around here, Barry? I know he was from Guelph. Oscar Judd. Was he
he lives between Thamesford and
Springford.
Ingersoll.
Was he from Ingersoll?
He lives closer to London than Ingersoll, but people don't think that.
Oh, okay, yeah, but Tip O'Neill was from Springford, was he?
Tip O'Neill's from Woodstock.
Oh, okay, I thought he was out the Tillsburg area. But anyways, he was the first Canadian Major League All-Star, and let me tell you a story again. Oscar Judd and Ted Alexander meet pitching duels. So one is on one team and Judd's on another team. And the box score in the newspaper says, hit by pitch, Judd by Alexander. The next line, Alexander by Judd. So it's tit for tat. You know, they were pros and they weren't going to give anything up. Quite a ball player. There's another interesting story. I can't wait to share this one in Brantford tomorrow night. Sadi Grote was a native from Brantford, Grand River, the largest native reservation facility now in land in Canada. Grew up in Brantford, then went over to the States and played lacrosse. Played 12 seasons of pro baseball. He played 3 games with Robinson. And his teammates were Chuck Connors and Gil Hodges. Now here's another question for you. Who the heck's Chuck Connors?
A rifleman.
A rifleman, absolutely, on television. Well, he was a great baseball player and gave it up to be an actor. And Gil Hodges was a former Dodger and manager, Hall of Fame member, etc. And Sadi and Gil Hodges were good friends, and Sadi Grote from Brantford named his first son Gil. So they knew each other for years. Now, Willie Mays, who just passed away here a while ago, was famous for the basket catch. You know, and of course, my coach would roll over in a grave if we did that. You know, you didn't do this kind of stuff. But evidently, Sadi Grote was doing that before Willie Mays. And he was really fast. But he came up, he played in the Intercounty, but he was also a World War II veteran, won a Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and Silver Star. And he was a really good athlete. Finished up in Newport News and bought a couple of restaurants. Now, here's a guy that I think should be in the Hall of Fame in the United States. I don't know why he isn't. His name is Wilmer Fields. They call him Wilmer the Great. He was a World War II vet out of Manassas, Virginia, played in the Negro Leagues, won a Negro League championship, and virtually after that time, he went wherever they paid him the most money. Remember we talked about money just a minute ago? Why did Russ Evon go? And why did Johnny Ambrose's father get so much money? Wilmer Fields, after he played in the Intercounty, played in Puerto Rico, Mexico, Venezuela, the Dominican Republic. Whoever paid him the most money. And he was always the best player on the team. Okay? Do you remember Jack Kent Cook?
Yeah.
Owner of
Toronto Maple Leafs baseball, Washington Redskins,
Los Angeles Lakers, okay. A Canadian businessman, you know, again, we gotta tell what Americans are. He convinced Wilmer to come and play for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And Wilmer didn't want to, but he signed a contract. He signed a contract to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs that was equivalent to a Major League Baseball contract. Jack Kent Cooke paid for his wife's transportation and accommodation on road trips, gave him a pile of money, and I found that Wilmer Fields made more money playing in Brantford than he did for the Maple Leafs, and he made more money than Willie Mays did in his first 2 years. That's how good he was. And they wanted, you know, they wanted him. Look, I mean, if you look at it, he won the batting championship twice, and he lost by 2 points in the other one. He led in pitching, hitting, home runs, everything. He was just a phenomenal player. And he brought with him another guy, Shanty Clifford, who was an all-around athlete, and Shanty was a batting champion. And, okay, here you go. Do you know Frank Cosentino? Who's Frank Cosentino? Yes, sir. He played intercounty baseball for Hamilton. And the Braves were interested in him. So a scout by the name of Dewey Griggs said, I'll meet you in Galt, and let's see what you got. And I'll get Shanty to catch you. Because Shanty was a catcher from the Negro League, so he knew his stuff. So Frank comes out to Galt, and he goes out in the bullpen, and he says, okay, go ahead. So Frank starts throwing, you know, he's loosening up. And then Shanty says, come on, kid, bring it. You know, like, throw it hard. Let's see what you got. So he's throwing hard. He says, come on, kid, you can do better than that. So Frank's just wailing it in there like that. He said, oh, that's good. He says, and then he was the starting pitcher. So he says, I lasted 2 innings. He said, they just lit me up, Galt. He said, then I realized that Dewey Griggs and Shanty had conned him into getting his arm tired. So Shanty was a character. They loved him. He stayed in Brantford for years. This is the best, I'm going to say it, the best Canadian all-around athlete that, except for the Windsor area and maybe the Baseball Hall of Fame, people know anything about. And that is Freddie Thomas. Freddie Thomas still holds the career scoring record at the University of Windsor. He was so good that Assumption College beat the Harlem Globetrotters when the Globetrotters weren't screwing around trying to entertain people. And Thomas was the top scorer twice. The owner, Abe Saperstein, hired Freddie Thomas to travel with the Globetrotters. He also knew he played baseball. Abe Saperstein got Freddie Thomas a pro contract with Bill Veeck. And Freddie Thomas from Windsor, Ontario, integrated that league, Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, that league. And he was a great ball player, and he was fast. And he played football for the Argonauts. And he came to the Intercounty because he sent him up to the Quebec League, and guess what? Somebody said, hey, Freddie, why don't you come play in the Intercounty? Well, how much would you pay me? So he left pro and played in Intercounty. And there's a story that I read in the newspaper, the Brantford paper, where the owner of the Brantford team, the Kitchener team, and I think the Galt team, Murray, were in the stands at a game in Brantford. And they said to the Kitchener guy who got Freddie to play for him, he said, what did it take to get Freddie to play for you? He says, I'm not going to tell you. And the Brantford guy says, well, we offered $850 a month, and he just laughed. So that's the kind of money these guys were making. But he was terrific. He's in the Baseball Hall of Fame, and he's in the Basketball Hall of Fame, of course, too. In 2024, just a terrific athlete. Guelph was not going to be left behind, so they reached out to some former Major League ball players that kind of had, had their heyday. And this guy, Pat Seary, was a big guy, chubby guy. He played for the White Sox and Cleveland Indians, and he hit 4 home runs in one game in the Major League Baseball. And at the time, there weren't very many people that had done that. And he came up and played in Guelph, and packed the ballparks. He was quite a hitter, and everybody liked him. They also, Guelph picked up Phil Marshall, who I mentioned to you. He was also a World War II vet. Great story. Got shot down and survived. Terrific story. Then they picked up a bit of a novelty, but the guy could play. The first one-armed baseball player in baseball. Later on, Jim Abbott pitched a no-hitter with a one-arm. Was a one-arm pitcher. But he was the first. And Pete played for the St. Louis Browns during the war, and that's the rap on him. You know, the best players were veterans, they went into the war. He couldn't go, and he told the recruiter, he says, if I can swing a baseball bat and run and catch a ball and throw people out, you think I can't handle a rifle? But they didn't take him, but he did a lot of war work. And there is a guy that Barry probably would know, and I played against longer, or earlier than Barry did, Walt Jeffries. Walt's 96 or 7. And he tells a story that Pete was quite a drinker. And you had to pick him up at his house and get him in the car to go on the road trips, because if he met you at the ballpark, you had a bottle with him, and you'd be in the stands, or you'd go, or they'd try to get him out of the hotel. So he was a bit of a drinker, but he was no fluke, because he was the most valuable player in the Southern League, and he played up in Quebec, in Trois-Rivières, and there's great stuff. My wife Susie's here, good French Canadian, and we got some newspaper articles that were written in French. And the thing that I got out of it with her help was they loved him up there. He'd win some, get some hits, and they'd stuff money in his pocket. So, anyways, I want to tell you, if I can, a quick story about Bobby Deacon. This is a guy from London, Ontario. He was an all-star. He was the most valuable player. He was considered to be one of the finest fielding second basemen, possibly even shortstop, but was being groomed to go to the Yankees. No question about it. That's how good he was. This is an article I found in the newspaper at spring training. He goes 5 for 5 and opened the eyes of everybody. And what happened to Bobby Deacon is sad. He went to AAA, and he was playing, he got injured, and he came back. He's playing second baseman. A ground ball comes to him, double play, guy on first. He turns to throw the ball to the shortstop, and the guy from first base tries to jump over him. Didn't get over him. Landed on his back with his knees and broke his back. Not too many people know this, but the guy that collided with him was George Altman, who later played for the Chicago Cubs for years. Not intentional. Bobby never really recovered. He did. He was in the cast for a long time, came back to London, recuperated, went to spring training. They tried it like that, and then one spring training he went back, and he said to the Yankees, he said, I can't hit. He said, I can't hold a bat. So he didn't play any more baseball. Then how good was he? How good was he? I'll tell you how good he was. The Yankees did not release him from his contract for 14 years. Why? Why? Because they thought maybe if he comes back, he'll go with somebody else. So Bobby Deacon is still alive. Yeah.
Can you tell them the story about Ted Williams and Bobby Deacon?
Oh, yeah, in the batting cage? Yeah, he's down at spring training, and you know, he's with the Yankee organization, and the Red Sox were, I think they were in Sarasota, and they were, you know, playing an exhibition game, and Ted Williams looks over the batting cage, and here's this Canadian from London hitting line drives, you know, just looking good. And I guess Williams walks over to him and says, hey kid, what, keep swinging the bat like that, you'll be up in the majors pretty soon. Never saw anybody swing a bat like that, you know, or something like that. So he's certainly well respected. Here's two other guys that played in Brantford, Jimmy Wilkes and a guy who played for the Yankees and the Cincinnati Reds, Bob Thurman. Jimmy Wilkes, I played 1 year against in 1963. He and his team won 5 Intercounty championships in a row. And then he umpired for 23 years. Okay, so there's a lot about Jimmy Wilkes. Just terrific guy. Probably made one of the great. You remember the Willie Mays catch against the Indians? Center field over the head. and all that kind of stuff is on television, it's on YouTube. Jimmy Wilkes made a catch like that in Yankee Stadium, where the monuments are against the great black player Josh Gibson. But it wasn't covered, because they didn't cover it as much, but it's verified. And Jimmy's great. I gotta tell you the story. I'm up to bat in London. Wilkes is behind on the plate. You know, we all respected Jimmy Wilkes. We're not gonna harass him. So, a pitch comes on the outside corner, strike. Strike three, same spot. I looked at him, I says, is that a good pitch? He says, I got a better look at it than you did. So I went back to the dugout, and next to Gabby Anderson, I said, whoa, geez, I thought that was outside. He says, well, he called a strike as a strike, Paul. And he said, but he said something to me. What did he say? I said, well, gee, Gabby, he said, I had a better look than you did. He said, you don't get it, do you? He's coaching you. He's telling you to watch that outside pitch. And that's the kind of stuff. He was fast. His nickname was Seabiscuit. Okay, class, who's Seabiscuit, or what was Seabiscuit? Famous, absolutely. One of the fastest Kentucky Derby winners, and he was called Seabiscuit. That's how fast he was. And the stories about Jimmy Wilkes is to say you only need two outfielders when you play against the Brantford Red Sox. Jimmy Wilkes and another guy. You don't need the other guy. They'll cover everything. And I hope you enjoy these stories. But I recall in 1963 as a rookie coming up, hitting the ball between shortstop, center field, and left fielder in between. And I'm thinking, hey, stand up double. I'm going down the reason, all this, Coach, hey, you're out, out. Yeah, you caught it. Oh, okay. Go back 3 or 4 innings, come up again, hit one to right center field. This is a stand up double. See the ball right in front of it. Holy shit, you caught that one too. You know, and I went back and I said, the same guy, Gabby. I said, Gabby. I said, because I didn't know him at the time. I said, who is that guy? He said, that's an old horse that can still run. So those are my memories of Jimmy Wilkes. Okay, moving along pretty well. There's the great hammer, Hank Aaron. Again, I'm giving you some news that probably a lot of people don't know. He almost played for the Brantford Red Sox. He was playing for the Indianapolis Clowns in Buffalo. Don't ask me why, but they were stationed in Buffalo called the Indianapolis Clowns. Probably somebody had the franchise name. And Dewey Griggs, that same guy that conspired with Walt Jeffries, told the story about Frank Cosentino, was scouting the games. And before the game, he went in and he saw Jimmy Wilkes, who he knew, and he said, anybody in here on your team could play Major League Baseball. And Jimmy Wilkes is that kid over there, Hank Aaron. He says, remember that name. He says, because if he don't make Major League Baseball, my name ain't Jimmy Wilkes. So, Riggs watched the game, and at the time, Aaron was hitting cross-handed, like this, like that. Hit a line drive over the right center field, hit a couple other shots, made a good play, played short side. Dewey Griggs goes right away and sends a telegram to the Boston Briggs. He says, we need to sign this kid right away. And the guy says, well, who is he? He says, trust me, we screwed up on Willie Mays. We didn't take Willie Mays. We got to take this kid. So they did, and they signed him. And later, Hank Aaron said, if the Giants had given me $50 a month more, Hank Aaron and Willie Mays would have been in the outfield together. And those are two of the top home run hitters of all time. So he was certainly well respected, but he almost went there. You will enjoy, if you get the book, the story of the ownership of the Brantford Red Sox. Because Larry Pennell was the owner, and Larry Pennell was a member of Parliament and was a federal cabinet minister. And he loved baseball. And he's the guy that almost signed Hank Aaron. There are 2 pitchers from Galt, Jeep Jessup and Ed Steele. That's the guy I told you about hitting the home runs off the thing. And Ed Heather told me that Jeep Jessup was, his name is Gentry. Jeep Jessup was so popular in Galt, and the kids loved him. They used to want to carry his bag and glove and stuff in. And they said, if he'd run to be the mayor, he said, no one even run against him. He was so popular and well respected. Now, let me tell you about 1954 and a quick thing. I told you about the New York Yankees guy, but this is a Canadian was born not too far out of London in that little town.
Can't remember.
Senior moment. I wrote the book. It'll come, but it's just outside of London.
Newcastle or something?
Newbury.
Newbury.
Newbury. Plays for London. Played for Stratford when they beat London in the heyday. Pitched. So he signs, goes to pro ball, plays all over the place, and comes back. But he played in Hollywood, California. But folks, you got to remember the baseball team in California, Hollywood, was called the Hollywood Stars. This is before anybody in the major leagues moved to California. So that's the hottest ticket in town. This is AAA baseball at its best. Really good ball players there. They are owned, part shares, by the Hollywood Stars. And this guy evidently hobnobbed with some of those people up there. These are the owners of the Hollywood Stars. Bob Hope, Groucho Marx, Bing Crosby, George Burns and Gracie Allen, Gary Cooper, Gene Autry, Jane Mansfield, Elizabeth Taylor, Bill Holden, Humphrey Bogart, Ginger Rogers, Frank Sinatra, Dean Sinatra, and the chairman was Cecil B. DeMille, the great movie actor. And they all had a share of this team. And he's supposed to have hung around with Ginger Rogers and Groucho Marx and all this kind of stuff. The thing that I enjoyed reading and seeing in the newspapers is this young lady was a Batgirl. You know who that is? Elizabeth Taylor. She was like 17 or 18 years old. And then they decided to have Miss Hollywood Stars to promote the team. They picked Jane Mansfield. Now, the story behind Jane Mansfield is that she had a lovely figure. Is that fair to say? And when you're a baseball player and you're around third base, what are you supposed to do? Look at the coach and see if he's holding you up or waving you in. This guy's getting a good look at his third base coach, Jane Mansfield. But Bogart used to go to the ballpark. If you went to a game there, you could sit down and maybe next to you would be Frank Sinatra or Humphrey Bogart. And I was telling my wife, we stopped at Ingersoll at Chuck's, in the restaurant. And I said, she said, well, I don't know, I won't have a steak. I said, well, a hot dog at the ballpark's better than a steak at the Ritz. And that's what Bogart is supposed to have said. That's how much they loved baseball at the time. But he came back and played in Brantford, in London. Brantford picked up Max Manning and Barney Brown. They were great ball players, Negro League players. Barney Brown played out in North Dakota, and they were beating another Bismarck in Jamestown, and Jamestown was beating Bismarck, and the owner of the team says, God, I hate losing to these guys. Can't we get somebody that can beat this Barney Brown? So he phones up Abe Saperstein, the owner of the Globetrotters, who also did barnstorming baseball games. Okay, and he says, Abe, his name is Churchill, Neil here, he says, can you get me a guy that can beat Barney Brown? He says, yeah, what about Satchel Paige? Will he come? And you know the answer was, he'll go anywhere if you pay him enough money. He once said, I wouldn't throw ice cubes for the amount of money you're offering me. Like, he got a percentage of the gate, he got accommodation, he got a car, everything. Satchel was a great promoter. He goes out and they play and they win, lose, and they brought extra train cars to take people from Bismarck to Jamestown. And they brought in extra seats. They did the same thing in 1948 when Brantford played Galt in the semifinals. They trucked in extra stands for those series. Because and same as London. London was packed at that time. 1957, real quick, Frank Coleman's from London, Ontario, played for the Yankees, was a good friend with Yogi Berra, and thanks to Barry, when Frank Coleman died, Berra wrote a letter, and he had visited him many times, and he said, I've made a lot of friends in baseball through the years, but always remember Frank as one of the most decent and genuine people that I have ever met. I was proud that he was my friend. And that's quite a compliment for a little guy from London, Ontario, playing in the major leagues. There's another major leaguer, he played for Oshawa, he pitched for the New York Yankees, he played in this league. That's my third coach, Willie, and the story between him is they're both Italian. So Willie Casanova is invited to, at the time, Briggs Stadium, Tiger Stadium, okay, and they wanted to take a look at Willie because they'd heard about him in the minor leagues. They said, come on over, and they throw batting practice, and Willie's sitting, you know, a couple into the stands. And Rizzuto, the veteran, is saying, come on, Casanova, show us what you got, buddy. You know, you ain't in the minor leagues now. Come on, let's see what you got. And Willie hits, I guess, 4 or 5 in a row. 2 of them in the upper deck. And Rizzuto went. Shut up. But he played in London, and he also played another team. That's the last Negro League player that played in Canada in the Intercounty. The Mandak League closed in 1950, and Larry Cunningham played well up into our times, right? Did you play against Cunningham?
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't know what happened to him, where he went, what happened. Real quick to finish up, taters. Baseball expression for a tater is a long home run, a blue dart, hit him where the grass doesn't grow, a Ruthian blast, you know, a salami, whatever the major league guys want to call them. And I like taters. And I want to tell you about this Flat Chase guy, okay? Played for Chatham. He evidently holds the record for the longest home runs in certain places in Ontario. Chatham, Dresden, Strathroy, and Welland. And I think North Buxton, because he hit a CNR train. Okay. He hit one in Welland, and the newspaper said, they're still looking for it. This guy was a mammoth hitter. So, I heard a story in Chatham where I grew up, that one of my guys that knew Boomer Harding, who played with Flat Chase. And he said, Flat hit a home run at this ballpark. When we were there, it was called Rotary Field, but now it's Fergie Jenkins Park. Of course. You know, but it's Fergie Jenkins Park at Rotary Park. So, Flat hits a home run over the right field fence. It's relatively short here. This is in fair territory. Still, it's probably about 270, 267, 270. And then this green part right here was a football field, and a track ran around the outside of it. Okay, so again, we have to do the math real quick. 270, 3 lanes of track, 36 inches each, blah, 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 blah. How wide is a Canadian football field, folks? 65 yards. How wide is the American one? 55. 65 yards. He hits the ball over the fence, over the track, over the football field, and it hit the asphalt of the parking lot of that black area. It used to be the Kinsman Auditorium. When I was in high school, we went to the Crystal Ball dance there. And then there's the Chatham Memorial Arena, built right after the war. The ball goes unbelievable distance. Is it possible that the ball could have gone that far? Yes. Because Luke Easter, the big, strong guy who played for the Cleveland Indians at the time, left-handed batter, hit a ball in Buffalo over the center field scoreboard that hit a house on the other side of the street. And the lady said, I thought it was an atomic bomb. Now, if that ball went 550, 585 feet, just think of how far that had gone if it didn't hit the top of the house and hit the pavement on the street. It could have been in Lake Erie. And same with Flat Chase's home run. He hit a long one. I did see, not this one, I'll tell you in a second, Wilbur Fields hit a home run in Mexico City, and I put a star where they said the home run went. He hit it over the center field scoreboard, over this sign. Fuji, I think, was Fuji film, hit it over there, and it landed on the road. And Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, and some other guys played in the Mexican League also. And Wilbur Fields in his book says, I wish they'd have seen that one. So he was a terrific ball player, a great ball player. I was in Tiger Stadium, Bridge Stadium, when Mickey Mantle hit a home run out of the ballpark, over the top deck, cleared Trumbull Avenue, landed on the Checker Cat building, and it was unbelievable. I just stood there, and I didn't know the guy I was sitting with. I was in university and went over the game, and I said, "Did you see what I saw?" He says, "Yeah, he hit the out of here." He said, "It's gone." And the next day in the newspaper they said, "Mantle launches ball in orbit," because the satellite, remember the Telstar and the satellites were going, and they said launches ball into orbit. But it was a memorable thing. This is a crappy picture because it was photoshopped. You know, they got nobody in the stadium, but they took it out of the newspaper and took the people out. Why, I don't know. But somebody questioned on that one too. So, well, I'm pretty well done. I want to tell you that the last chapter, in case there's any pitchers in here, or, you know, lovers of pitchers, I didn't forget them because they threw smoke hard. So I wrote up about the guys that pitched. And I got a chance to reminisce with some guys. I told you about Tubby Jones, Jack Bears, Ronnie Hordera played shortstop for the Brantford Red Sox when they beat Galt, and later became a Catholic priest. And I got to talk to him before he passed away. Barry Howson was Olympian. He played for London and St. Thomas. I talked to Gabby Anderson's wife, and I also spoke to Mike Kilkenny, who played when I didn't play with him. Barry did, and he was a former pitcher for the Detroit Tigers. And a wonderful, wonderful man. And then, thanks to my wife and a guy who's the off-ice official for the Ottawa Senators that I play golf with, they said, "Sounds like a pretty interesting book, but you know what I'd like to know?" And I said, "No, what would you like to know?" They said, "What did these guys do after they got done playing baseball?" So I took all the names and did everything I could to find out what did they do after baseball. And it turned out to be a pretty darn good chapter, because some of them are sad stories, some of them are good stories. I'll leave that to you in case you get the book. And the other thing I want to tell you is I put a little box every once in a while. So you read, there's some pictures, you read, and there's a little box in there. So I was able to tell a Tom Burgess story. You want to hear it? Walked into the dugout. Burgess is already out on the field. Or not the dugout, went into the clubhouse. Guys are getting their uniforms on. And Tom Burgess was a major league ball player, so he dressed immaculately. Remember the Arnold Palmer sweaters, the cardigans, and when he wore those or something like that. And he held his socks up with garters and stuff like that. So over on the hook, he had hung up his clothes. And he had silk boxer shorts. Catcher for our team walks over and he says, "Oh boy, look at this." He shows the sweater over his lap. He says, "Look at these babies. This is what we wear in the major leagues." Puts them on over his uniform. Everybody's just killing themselves. Who walks in the door? Tom Burgess. And he looks, and we go, "Whoop!" And catcher Jack,
The catcher
yeah,
from St. Thomas,
yeah.
not Finland.
Anyways,
You know, he passed away.
I know.
Yeah.
Isn't that awful? But anyways, he says to him, he says, "Oh, Skip, just having some fun." And everybody stopped laughing, and Burgess didn't miss a beat. He says, "Pook." He says, "Pook?" He said, "If I had another catcher, you'd be sitting there." That's the kind of stuff I was able to put into the extra thing. So I am done. I told you the Walt Jeffrey story. Interesting black players from the Negro Leagues. Really good stories about them. There's father, Ronnie Hordera. I called him, talked to him. Sharp as a tack, told me all kinds of stories, and I added an extra chapter reminiscing because of him, the things that he told me. A wonderful, wonderful man, and he was great. So I'm done. I do this out of respect for those from baseball, hockey, my parents, your parents, brothers, sisters, wives, that are no longer with us. But we have those memories of those people. And for some people, maybe wacky, excited, crazy people like me, we really like baseball. There's so many memories, you know? It isn't just necessarily the game or the score. It's just, you know, you did something and you remember what happened, you know? It's like when Kennedy got shot.
everybody kind of remembers those things, or various things that happened in your life. And those people are gone. Mickey Mantle's gone. Stan Musial, Willie Mays, Hank Aaron, you know, the Scooter, Rizzuto, Bob Feller, people that, Al Kaline, all those guys are gone. So when we are doing a talk as a fundraiser, and there's access to the bar, everybody's had a drink, and I say, stand up, and let's toast those people. And then what we do, and they had fun in Chatham doing this, I hope it will come through, I said, okay, me out with the crowd,